This episode is brought to you by Riverview Boat Store in Bellevue, Iowa. Food you love and supplies you need. Look them up at riverviewboatstore.com. Welcome back to Between the Levees. I'm joined today by Captain Travis Valence. 18 years now with ACBL. His father was in the wheelhouse. We're going to get into all of this. Travis, thank you for joining me.
Hey, thank you. Good morning to you.
And you too, man. Glad we could finally get this one done.
It took a little bit, huh?
Yeah, we got it worked out. No big deal. I don't know if you saw on Facebook, I'm actually booked through December now.
I saw that. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
impressive.
So
good for you.
I'm backing off
Good.
a little bit next year, but we'll keep
Yeah.
going. Anyway, you know how these begin, sir. How many have you listened to?
Two of them. I listened to a couple of them. Kindl and Knoy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that'll work.
I guess early on, when you first started. Yeah.
That was what, 70 episodes ago, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway, man, tell me, of course, first, where were you born?
Baton Rouge. I was born in Baton Rouge. Grew up in Central. Moved to Baton Rouge proper, midways, probably when I was middle school or so. We eventually moved out to a place called Grove State.
Was your father in the wheelhouse your whole life?
Yeah. I grew up. He was already in the industry for a while. So growing up, that was my impression. Him coming home every day. He did a variety of things. He was in the fleet. He was in the canal. Never did heavy tows, but he was local in the fleets.
Tell me what you can about his career.
Well, I mean, it was a huge impression on me growing up. I remember, going to the parking lot, picking him up with my mom as a kid. Seeing him getting off the boat. We had one vehicle back then, if I remember. Just seeing him getting off the boat. Back then, those days it was a lot different. Obviously, just seeing everybody, deck crew, drenched in sweat, grease, long hair, tattoos, seeing all those guys coming off there, and it was something for a kid to see. I thought to myself, wow, these guys are pretty cool, and seeing him being the captain, it was an amazing, feeling for sure.
Did you ever get a chance to step on the boat with him?
I did, yeah. Back in those days, I mean, I don't know, maybe smaller companies nowadays, but I was able to ride with him a couple of days on a trip. The company he worked for allowed it, and it was kind of a blur, thinking back on it now. But I remember, waking up with him, going in the wheelhouse, in the galley, eating, with the crew, just the general atmosphere. And there was times where he was on the boat that would push the barge for the 4th of July fireworks in Baton Rouge. We rode on that boat once, and again, this was decades ago. That was pretty amazing, to get really the best view, with the exception of everything falling back down on you, right? But it was great though. Yeah.
What was your first impression of the boat when you got on?
My first impression, remembering again, being a kid, but just the smells, the towboat, again, back in those days, it was a little different, but it was just the diesel, the guys out there, working, just everything, the whole environment, it was good.
Did you know from that point forward that this was going to be your career?
I wanted to, yeah. No, I definitely wanted to be, in the wheelhouse, be a captain like my dad growing up. That was something, as early as I could remember, wanting to do that. That was basically the only thing I wanted to do. Yeah, I mean, as growing up, being age appropriate to work out there, it took a couple of years, but finally got out there.
Did you have any other family on the river?
Yeah. Almost every male in my family either has worked on the river or currently working out there. Yeah, from my uncles to everybody was always on the water. My dad growing up in Grand Isle, my mom on her side down, down the bayou. So it was always closely related to the river for sure. But in the industry, yeah, almost every single male. Yeah.
Did your mom work?
No, she was a stay at home. She was a house wife. She was a homekeeper. She kept everything going.
You have any siblings?
I do. Yeah, I have an older brother and an older sister. Yeah.
Is your brother on the river?
He is. Yeah, he's semi-retired for a bit. I think he may be coming back, but yeah, he's out there.
All right, well, let's get back to you. Tell me about growing up, school up to high school, and then eventually the jump to
Yeah, man,
onboarding.
growing up, it was a good childhood. Like I'm fortunate. I had great parents. Both my dad and my mom. My dad, he was a church going individual. So we grew up in church. Um, it was just a solid, home. It really was. We weren't rich. We weren't, we didn't have everything. My dad worked hard, and my mom made sure that everything stayed, put, and everything was good. The growing up, school, wasn't a huge fan of it. Through middle school, didn't like it. High school, didn't like it. Nothing ever really clicked with me, and I was more always an on hands type of person. I wanted to be. I think a lot of it growing up and knowing where I wanted to go at an early age. I saw a lot of the other stuff and thought, I don't think I need to know all these things to be a captain. True proved to be, wrong. But the yeah, I mean, going into the high school early on, I knew it wasn't going to be for me. Um, got my GED, and it was probably, I want to say, until I was right around 19 or 20 before I started working out on the river. And once December 2005, and that was it. I've been there ever since.
What'd you do between getting your GED and that point?
Oh man, a lot of questionable things. Working here and there, odd jobs, from working at Walmart to working in warehouses, just trying to finding different stuff to do. Yeah,
And in '05, was that with McKinney?
it was. Yeah, it was McKinney Towing, which was at Tiger Fleet at the time. That was ACBL came in '07, March of '07. But yeah, it was McKinney Towing. Yeah.
Well, tell me about that experience.
Got hired on. They were, was fortunate enough I was able to start out with my dad. They on the Shannon Holston at Tiger Fleet, worked with him, and everything growing up, you have this image, you have this perspective, and when you actually get there, everything changes. It is not, as you thought it was growing up. It's real. This is where we are. We're, really doing it now. Probably for that first year, man, I was, all over the place. Probably not the best deckhand for sure. Took a while to really get going, learning and whatnot. But once I got it, that was it. Working with my dad, that was a great experience for me. That was something, I hold dear now to this day since he's passed. It's I'll never forget those times with him, because everything growing up led to that, coming out to the river and being able to experience that with him, having that first impression of somebody. He was good to his people. He was a kind-hearted individual, stern when he needed to be. He had no problem being a captain for sure. But for the most part, seeing him be, the church going man, or the brother Skippy, as he would, refer to himself, seeing that, people had a lot of respect for him, still do to this day. And that definitely, pressed upon me for sure, seeing that. There was, working out there again, this was tow building days. You have to excuse the background noise, sorry. But it was, back then Tiger Fleet was a little different than what it is now. So you learn tow building from very early on, day one, coming to work. You got several boats in the fleet. You got a couple of them backed into the hill. It was going to be a great day.
Well, walk me through your career up from deck to the wheelhouse.
So yeah, it was definitely wasn't really all that exciting. You know, a lot of bumps and bruises along the way, and a lot of help. You know, a lot of people, you know, helped along the way. Going back, started in '05 as a deckhand with McKinney. Definitely, you know, just crew, just tow building, you know, rebuilding, breaking tow, making it. Didn't catch on as quick as everybody else would. You know, just for whatever reasons, a lot of different things. I want to say about a year into it, I really started coming into my own. About that time, my lead man had quit, which put me solely responsible. So he had left, and it was just me. And those days were a little different to where you could deck by yourself, you know, as long as everybody was okay with it. A lot of times it was, you know, several towboats, you know, build and tow, and it was just one deckhand. So you learn very early on how to manage. You know, if you're going to stick out there, you've got to pace yourself, and you've got to learn, you know, how to work smart, not hard, so to speak. Working in those years, um, it was a great foundation to build on, for sure. It wasn't perfect, but I think that's what made it really, really solid. Going into '07, March of '07, that's when we found out that ACBL was going to purchase a lot of the McKinney boats. Employees had an opportunity to join, you know, to come on to ACBL. And after looking at the benefits package and the pay, and I immediately saw opportunity. I thought, okay, well, this is going to be great for my career wherever I go. You know, at that point, you know, that's what I was thinking. You know, bigger picture, because I want to say at that point I already had a daughter. You know, so I was thinking bigger picture stuff.
What was one of the biggest challenges you found out there in that first year?
Endurance. You know, it's hot, it's cold, it's rains. You know, it every environment that you're going to work in. Again, this is where the rubber meets the road. You know, when you think about it growing up, you don't see these little details, right? These, you know, these challenges. You just have an image in your head. I want to be just like my dad. You know, it's poetic, but when you get out there, you realize in order to get there, in order to achieve even a quarter of what he had achieved, it was not going to be an easy road. You know, and as a young man, that took a little bit, you know, for me to get going. The biggest challenge was adapting to it, you know, growing up, almost, so to speak. You know, this isn't a warehouse job. This isn't, you know, an hotel, you know, maintenance worker job. This is something very different than anything I had ever experienced before. This was reality, you know, and you're outside, and when you want the wind to blow, it does not blow. You know, when you want that shade, there is none. You know, the steel is always hot. You know, the ratchets are always going to be heavy, and so is the wires. You know, rigging is, you know, is a killer. So yeah, my first huge impression was just settling in.
And then how many years with ACBL until you climbed up into the wheelhouse?
This was, let's see, from '07. There was a period, let's see, from '07 on, I want to say into maybe 2011, 12 was me decking. At that point, I came across an individual who to this day is a mentor, you know, to me. By far, I'd say everybody I ever encountered, excluding my dad, that, you know, he was the reason to really give me the opportunity to really, you know, get a chance to do something. That was he was a senior lead. He's since retired, but George Tobias. You know, he was, you know, he had trained hundreds of people at ACBL. When he came out on tow, you know, he was a unit one, you know, first mate on the Frank Raider, I believe it was. Every time they would come into the fleet, you know, you start learning the names of these boats, and you know the big boys that come in there. We're going to be digging in their tow. We're going to be making it, you know, building it from scratch, or either, you know, rebuilding it. Coming across a good solid crew on the mainline boat was huge. You know, guys that would already have the rigging broken down, already have the barge down to you. And George was that type of person. He was the top of the top, in my opinion. you get out there and he already had the barges broke down. His guys were already running out ratchets. I mean, the example of, in my opinion, of what it was to, to do that role successfully. Working with him whenever he would come into the fleet, was huge. And of course, he had been out in the industry for so long, just as my dad, and they had known each other from, the Deville days in Donaldsonville. So meeting him and just catching up with him, just shooting the breeze, finding out that, he knew my dad, he worked with me, and just kind of started from there. And he, one of the things that he had done with ACBL was teach RS1 classes, our training classes. When he wasn't out on tow, he would come out with a class of new employees, deck crew, and they would come to Tiger Fleet. At that time, that was the tow building fleet. They'd come out, they'd train, they'd get on the boats, they'd be dropped on the tow, and that's what they would do all day, him and new hires. So seeing him interact, seeing him teach, being a mentor for them, that kind of impressed upon me. That was something I was interested in doing. Knowing my background, knowing that it took a while for me to get started. I didn't have the easy going, I made it a lot more difficult than what I needed it to. Learning how to lay wires, because you got to understand, not every fitting is going to be right next to one another. You're going to have oddball fittings. You're going to have oversized barges that's going to throw everything off. A lot of troubleshooting. And early on, when, after my lead man had done left, it was just me trying to figure this out. So seeing these new hires come in, I thought maybe I had something to offer. Talking with him, working with him out on tow, working with the new hires, I had a liking for helping people. And again, I think this goes back to growing up with somebody like my mom, like my dad, somebody that wants to help people. So that was my introduction to George and new hires. And I was able to get an opportunity to teach an RS1 class, what we call a river seamanship. Well, at first went in there to be more of a helper on my time off. Came in for a couple of days helping them through a variety of different things, and I got comfortable speaking in front of 15, 20 people here and there, going out on tow, with them on my off time. So it was an opportunity. And the more I did it, the more I loved it. At that point, while the wheelhouse was always in the foreground, it's always something I wanted to achieve for sure. To get there, I started seeing other opportunity. And, again, working with George and meeting him and, all the different people that taught those classes and different people in management, learning how things, worked behind the scenes on the other side of the levee. Doing that after a while, was able to become an RS1 instructor, almost full time permanently. When I wasn't teaching classes, it was, on tow. It was going, building tow, time off, going back, back on the boats. And I'd say it wasn't until a little while later, at that time, they had started an what's the word? More like a QE, an evaluator for our fleets. That was basically somebody that come out, work with deck crew that it's ready to be promoted. If there was anything that they needed help on, policies or procedures or just work practices. So that's where I was. The role popped up. I applied for it. It was a QE. The official title was QE, Qualified Examiner. Not too many people wanted the job. Nobody really wanted that position because it puts you in a position to where it's easy to fail for sure, because you have a lot of eyes on you. You're the person going out evaluating these guys, making sure that they know their stuff, just as the captain had stated, helping them where they need it, and signing off on our end. Working with the captain, in that position as QE, when I got the position, that was, again, evaluate individuals, train RS1 new hires, and deck here and there where they needed me. So it was almost like 3 different roles I was tackling, and that was good. It was a great experience. I'd say to this day, of all the roles that I've had, I think that was probably the most one of the more meaningful roles for sure. It's something I really felt, because it was helping people. It was giving them. It was making sure that they got a shot. Individuals that was passed up, passed over, that didn't have it easy. They finally got a chance to show, and just being part of that, it was huge for me. Let's see. So we got deckhand, moving up to lead. Eventually senior lead, working at Tiger, going to work at CCI Baton Rouge when ACBL was there, learning dead eye wires, going through the locks, the port down locks. Yeah, I mean, moving on to the QE role until 2013, and I have said that's whenever I first met Jeff Kindl, and that's when everything changed for me professionally.
Fill me in on the next steps.
I at that point, I had gotten to the QE role pretty good. It was only me at that point in ACBL. We only had Tiger Fleet, Ormont, and Harahan. I would jump between those 3 fleets, evaluating people. The again, RS1 classes, training those. I became proficient in that. Teaching my own classes. When George would have to go back on the boats, and then they still needed classes to be taught, I would jump in, because the type of work schedule, we'd have it down in Port Allen, where it was 2-week classes back then. And I want to say it was around that time, I can't remember the exact year, but that's when Mark Knoy, Jeff Kindl, and a variety of other people had came to ACBL. And I met Jeff, let's say the first time I met him, he had came out to the boats, and meeting him, it was not knowing his history, not knowing anything about him. He was a very, polite, well-spoken, individual. You can tell, this guy was quick. He was very astute. Meeting him, interacting with him, the times that I did, you could see that, we got a guy now, in the company that's going to take care of everything. He was very, you know him from, experience, I'm sure, but solid individual for sure. There was a position that opened up in Armont, the assistant facility manager position. That role was previously led by a individual, again, a mentor of mine, the late Mark Duplantis. He was the facility manager over Ormont, and for a number of years, and he had built a great thing down there for sure. A great guy, just boat oriented, crew oriented. He had an easygoing temperament. He was just a good guy for sure. He ended up being promoted, moving on to the next step of his career, and that left a void. A couple of people suggested that I apply. So, what do I know? I'm just a glorified deckhand at this point. I like teaching classes. I like helping people. There's no way. There's no way I don't have it. Applied. I went ahead and did it anyway. People kept pushing. Went ahead and did it, and interviewed. I think that was the first time I was actually interviewed in my adult life, and looking back on it, it went pretty well, obviously, but it was very intimidating. Sitting with Jeff, being interviewed by him, it was something for sure. And I got the phone call a little while later saying, "Hey, if you'd like to join the team." Yeah, sure would. Heck yeah. I said, "Yes, sir. Mr. Kindl." He said, "Just call me Jeff." And at that point, it was on. you know. Went on to Ormont, and throughout my career, I had been to Ormont. I had met captains over there. I'd met the deck crew. In fact, most of the deck crew at that point had already been there for a while or passed through the RS1 classes that I trained. So I already had some interaction with them. I already knew the crews. I already knew the crew rotations, the crew schedules. At that point, the operation had moved heavily to Ormont, a lot of the tow building. So I was already familiar with the tow building aspect of it. So it was a combination of factors, I think, that put me, in that position. And Jeff taking a chance on me, which I'm sure a lot of people would attest that he took a chance on a lot of people. He impacted a lot of people's lives for sure. Going into that role, that was something that was, again, completely new to me. I knew the boats, I knew the crews, but the operational aspect of it, and that's where I came across individuals that helped me, kind of mentored me, that was there. Went into it with the crews. One of the first things I did coming on was, started to meet people, interacting with the shore side, meeting the supervisors, the welders, the fitters, every individual that was going to work there. I wanted to know who they were. Had opportunity once, met the shore side personnel, moved on to the boats, meeting the deck crew. Again, I knew a majority of them. Meeting the wheelhouse personnel, talking with them, but this time in a different perspective, because, in this role, it was, lack of a better term, it was as a port captain of these fleet boats. I had it was four fleet boats at the time. By the time I left, it was 5. I was in that role for several years. Had its challenges from day one. Dealing with an injury from the very first day, and seeing it through. That, as Jeff said, it was almost like baptism by fire. It was, looking back, all those scenarios, all those challenges would later benefit me as a captain for sure. It was a great time. My time in Ormont, again, I wouldn't change anything. A lot of learning, a lot of tough love, a lot of phone calls in the middle of the night, right? A lot of phone calls when, holidays, it didn't matter, but you accept that responsibility when you take a role like that. Working with those guys, from the holidays, to the dead, dog days of summer, being there for them when they need it, because that's the thing. What I've learned early on is the captains, they know their job. You don't have to get involved to the point to where you're causing problems. Make sure that they have the resources they need. Trust them when they say, we trust these guys to build our tows, to move our barges. So when they say something, when they speak, listen. Especially when it comes from lead boat. Again, growing up, my dad ran lead boat. I believe it was Donaldsonville at the time. I remember those days where he would come home exhausted, mentally exhausted from running lead boat. So my respect for that role, for that position, going into it, I knew that was one of the most, more the one position that would take the most time into helping and learning, making sure that they had. Not saying the second boat or third boats were any different, but that's going to be the heart of your fleet. That's going to be the guy. Making sure I communicated with him to the point to where I knew what was going on, what to expect, no surprises, making sure they had everything they needed, and also getting out and riding with them constantly, for sure.
And what was the job transition eventually? Was the next step the wheelhouse?
Yeah, that was, so I held that role for a couple of years, and in that time period, being on the boats, again, going on my days, or what will be my days off here and there. At that point, an opportunity presented itself to become a steersman. I look at it as a, more of it's a vertical move, but the possibilities were, endless for me. I felt at that point I had acquired a lot of different experience from where I had started as a deckhand with a, little McKinney bag with a, huge flashlight, hard hat. That first year, ups and downs, muscling through it, working through it, and then here I am now. So moving into the wheelhouse, I had reached out. One of the things, what I had done at Ormont was anytime a boat would go into the fleet, I'd reach out to them when they left. How's things? How was the tow? Anything, you want to pass on to me? Was there any problems or anything that, just whatever. There's at that time I also had port mates or fleet mates is what we would call them. What his job would be to walk the tow, make sure everything is solid, make sure everything before it leaves. The idea in Ormont was for a southbounder to come in. Again, we didn't have Belmont or Convent at that time, so we took all the southbounders in, land them, break out. They would face up to the northbounder and go. Yeah, of course, any delay that we'd have to work through it. But the fleet mate, he would walk the tow, make sure everything was solid, wired up properly. 3 hours. That was the goal from the moment they land in the fleet to the moment they leave. That was the turn. Calling these captains, talking with them, building relationships with them, finding out if there was any problems. Because a lot of times, sometimes they just need to complain. They just need to vent. More often than not, though, it was all praises for those guys at Ormont, and I made sure that was communicated back to them. Doing our job is not easy. It's a high turnover in a deck crew. It's not something most people grow up wanting to do. But making sure that they receive their praises, make sure they receive, hey, this is why we do what we do, in a sense. But by doing so, built a relationship with a lot of captains. One of the captains, again, person that means the world to me, was captain on the motor vessel Steve Warden. It was a shuttle boat, still is, I believe, working in the Gulf. Was Captain Mark Waltman. This is an old school captain. This is an individual that pulled no punches. He had the knowledge. He was very old school. Growing up, that was my image. That old school style, captain. And I reached out to him when it came time for me to, to move on to my next step. And I asked him if I could steer under him, if it just be a part-time, be a full-time, whatever, just an opportunity. I knew what I was getting myself into because I knew he had the reputation of, being, again, old school in his ways. He's gonna do things the right way. He's gonna do it, the first time, no play, no BS. He said, yeah. And I trained under him. I steered under him for, I want to say it was close to 5 or so trips. And they started pulling deck crew or steersmen to fleets, to different boats to get a variety of different experience. The opportunity came for me to go back to the fleet and work on headlining, work on downstream, work on light boat maneuvering. And at that time, that was when ACBL got their first Z drive, or had gotten their first Z drive, the American way, and got an opportunity from there, and the rest is, yeah. I mean, at that point on, it goes, on and on for sure. Yeah, steered Steve Warden in the fleet with a variety of different captains.
Yeah, I've been on the American way a few times.
Yeah.
I got on at Tiger. It was probably, I don't know, 8 or 9 in the morning. And that was when Towworks was just rolling out. So I stuck around for Backwatch to come on.
Yeah.
Rode out with 10 from Tiger to CCI.
Mm-hmm.
That was about 5:30. We didn't leave CCI till 2 a.m. So I got stuck out there for quite a while. But anyway, is that boat back operating? I know it
Yeah,
had a
yeah,
little
it's
incident. Yeah.
yeah, it's back. Yeah, it's in the canal. It's in the canal now.
Okay.
But it's converted to live on. Yeah.
Well, where all have you run behind the sticks?
You know, it's great. Again, you know, I think about this every once in a while. Going where I started, right, to where I am now has been it's been a crazy journey. You know, and it's not over. You know, there's still, God willing, so much more. Started, you know, so it would be Fleet Work, Belmont, Convent, Ormont, Tiger. This is being turned loose as a wheelman, as a captain. So those fleets, a few years after I was turned loose in the fleets, opportunity popped up in the canals. Never worked in the canal, never had been in the canal other than, you know, what was needed for going behind Port Allen locks, but basically no experience back there. Again, growing up with my dad, hearing stories of Morgan City, Intercoastal City, you know, Lake Charles, Corpus Christi, hearing these things, Galveston Bay, never seeing them, you know, never experiencing, but I had it in my head, you know, one day, you know, maybe. Transferred to the canal. I had already, you know, again, when you work in the fleet, you get great light boat maneuvering, great headlining, you know, experience. All the maneuvering that you normally don't use in the canal, I had already gone into it, you know, with those tools in my toolbox, so to speak. I ran what they call the loop, which put me everywhere. So we'll just start at, say, New Orleans. We'll go through industrial locks, cross the Mississippi Sound, turn up into Mobile, go all the way up the Mobile River, go 10 Tom, see Lower Black Warrior, then the 10 Tom, Tom Bigby. Going through all those locks, taking a right at Tennessee River, going up to Decatur, then coming back, heading back toward the Ohio River by way of Tennessee River. Ohio River to the Lower Miss, which is 30 or so miles, you know, from Paducah to Cairo-ish. And from there all the way to back to Tiger, then we go into the Port Allen route to Intercoastal, all the way to Corpus. Never went past Corpus, never went to Brownsville. Orders always usually had us going to Corpus a couple times, a handful of times. Mostly it was going to be Lake Charles or Houston with a little Corpus, you know, Christi sprinkled in. So yeah, all that entire area. I did that run for close to a little over 3.5 years. I was on the boat, yeah.
What was your favorite place to be on that run?
The Tennessee River. Tennessee River, you know, weather is, you know, but the scenery, man, you know, Wheeler Lock, Wilson Lock, through, you know, going through these big bodies of water, these lakes, you know, the Kentucky Lake. It was what I would consider mountains. I don't know. I'm sure people up there would be like, no, they're just big hills, but you know, I consider them mountains, and you know, just gorgeous, beautiful. You know, especially in the winter, you get a little snow out there, and it really is beautiful as long as you're inside. You know, yeah, the Tennessee River was really gorgeous. Yeah.
Do you think your son will follow behind you?
I don't know. You know, growing up, my dad never pushed this onto us, right? It was, you know, my mom growing up, she didn't want any of her sons out on the river, you know, because of those horror stories, because of those worst case scenarios. Growing up, my dad, you know, I remember being with him at a meeting once, and one of the captains asked, you know, referred to me. And I think my dad said, you know, something along the lines of, you know, hope not, you know, kind of want something better, you know. But I think it resonates. I look at my son; he's, you know, 12, going to be 13 soon. If he ever wants to go out, you know, into the industry, sure, you know. But you know, you would hope, I would hope personally, that he would take a different path. the industry's been good to my family for decades growing up, for sure. But I'd have no issue with him going elsewhere, growing up, be a doctor, a dentist or something, maybe, taking care of me.
That's the hope, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, let's switch gears a little bit. Not necessarily
Sure.
directly about ACBL, but do you see any opportunities maybe to improve, or what would you change about training programs of the day?
I think knowing what I know, being where I've been, to look at new hires coming in, I think we do a pretty solid job already. Speaking industry terms, I think we do a pretty solid job, as best as we can, trying to identify candidates to come out here. But just like me, you're not going to really find out until you get out here, until what it's really like. This has come from somebody who glorified, who held the industry on a pedestal growing up, wanting to be a captain, wanting to be a deckhand, wanting to be out there. When you get out there, though, you realize that nothing's really handed to you. You're going to have to work for it. You're going to have to endure some tough environments. I think for the most part, we do what we can. It's when our people come out to the boats, right? I think at that point, that's when the most impression is made. You can have a 2-week training class, which is what we did, which I think was great, because we spent a lot of that 2 weeks out on the tows, right, before they even went to the boats. So when a new hire went out to the boats, they already had a better grasp than what they did previously. Now, I think a different take on it is, you could take that same individual, hold the shorter class, then immediately, once you go through the necessary paperwork, then put them immediately on the boat and then teach them from there, which I think a lot of the industry is doing. It's cost effective. You don't have to hold longer, large classes. You can put individuals right on the boat where they can immediately start, learning. There's some benefits to both. But where we go from here, I think, is just continuing to work on identifying individuals and giving them as much as a heads up. Not saying, hey, look, you're about to go in some terrible working conditions. This, you sure you want to do this? But at the same time, be real with the individuals. This is not. There's no such thing, in my opinion, of coming out here and 3 years later being in the wheelhouse. I think those days are long gone, and the industry's grown so much more now, to where there's more people, there's more competition, to even get in that wheelhouse. But again, when a new hire comes out to you, setting expectations early on is my biggest thing. Letting them know, this is what I expect, this is what I'm going to hold to, and do just that.
Well, with that in mind, how best do you think the industry could approach the apparent recruiting and retention issues that seem to be an industry standard these days?
I think for as long as we as long as we move borders, as long as it's going to be, you're going to have turnover. That's the reality of it. There is no solution to that. I think anybody, obviously there's, not saying that somebody, we shouldn't look for ways to improving, sure. But the reality is, being a deckhand is not the easiest thing, and that's the truth. Making and breaking tow is not the easiest thing to do. It takes a special type of person to do it, and do it successfully. You can come to work, clock in, punch the clock every day, and do a mediocre job. But I think that the best thing for us to do is just continue the path that we've done. Continue improving where we need to improve, and insight from new people. For sure. But also remembering what got us there too.
Well, have you seen turnover become worse over 18 years?
No, throughout the years, the few years of COVID, obviously, that, excluding that, during my time in Armont, we had built a pretty solid, consistent deck crew. Wheelhouse personnel, that's going to be different altogether, I think. But I'd have to say, it seems like it's improved. The pay has gotten better. working conditions, such as, requirements. There's no longer, a lot of companies don't allow one guy to deck by themselves, or at least give them the option. Do you want to deck by yourself? It's a lot different now. It's different than what it was in my dad's day and age. It's different than what it was, in my day and age, and it's going to be different 18 years from now. So I don't know where it goes from here, but I know it's gotten, I think, a little bit more conducive to people staying. So to answer your question, I think it's probably better now than what it was before. But that's just, going off of what I see. That's not to say there isn't turnover, for sure.
Anything else you'd like to share about the industry to wrap this thing up?
And, going back to my dad, growing up, learning early on to take care of your people, be good to them. And it's not a sales pitch. It's something genuine that I say is my deck crew. I've been fortunate to have really solid individuals, really great people, man. People from all walks of life, ups and downs. But man, I think if you show your people that you're willing to go to bat for them, right, that you'll speak up for them. That's the important thing. George Tobias, his famous phrase that goes on and on is, it's hard, but it's fair, and it's true. It is hard. It's a hard job. A set of rigging is always going to be heavy, right? It's always going to be 120 degrees, and the wind's never going to blow when you want it to. Be understanding, take care of your people, man, and uphold a standard, for sure.
I think that'll do it, man. I thank you for your time today.
All right, Tim, I appreciate you, and congratulations on this. I think it's a great thing what you're doing. Okay.
Thank you, man.
All right. Thank you.
This has been a production of Where You At Studios, LLC.